The Elysian wasn't just a ship, it was a tomb sailing on water. Restored from ruins, the cruise line advertised it as a journey through time. But few knew the truth. Every night, as the sea engulfed it, voices from the past surfaced, whispering secrets no one should hear. They weren't passengers, they were the dead. Sarah, a travel vlogger, couldn't believe her luck when she was invited to the maiden voyage of the Elysian. The ship, an artifact of 1960s luxury, promised elegance, grand ballrooms with gilded mirrors, spiral staircases, and corridors adorned with Art Deco motifs. It was the perfect setting for her content. From the moment she boarded, something felt off. The air was unusually cold, and the faint sound of a woman humming echoed through the reception hall. She looked around, but no one seemed to notice. Probably the wind, Sarah whispered to herself, brushing off the chill creeping up her spine. Her cabin, on the lower deck near the engine room, was small but cozy. A brass-framed mirror hung on the wall, reflecting the dim yellow glow of the cabin's lamps. As she unpacked, a strange smell wafted through the room, something metallic like rust. She glanced at the mirror. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw someone standing behind her. But when she turned, the room was empty. The first night passed uneventfully until 3 a.m. Sarah woke suddenly to the sound of muffled crying. It was faint, like it was coming from the hallway. Groggy, she opened her door to find the corridor empty, except for a trail of wet footprints leading to a corner. "Hello," she called out, but only silence greeted her. Her pulse quickened as she followed the footprints, each step amplifying the sound of distant whispers. They led to a hidden corridor she hadn't seen before. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing blackened wood beneath. A heavy iron door stood at the end, slightly ajar. Pushing it open, Sarah gasped. Inside was a room lined with old photographs of the ship's passengers. Each photo was burned or scratched, leaving only blank, haunting eyes. In the center of the room was a chair, its back turned to her. It creaked as if someone had just sat down. "Who's there?" Sarah's voice cracked. The chair spun around, revealing a woman in a tattered gown. Her face was bloated, her skin gray and waterlogged. She smiled, her teeth jagged and blackened. "You shouldn't have come here," she rasped, her voice layered with echoes. Sarah ran, her heartbeat thunderous. She locked herself in her cabin, trembling. Her camera sat on the desk, its red recording light blinking. Reviewing the footage, she froze. In the reflection of the mirror, she saw the woman standing behind her, her fingers brushing Sarah's shoulder. The next morning, Sarah reported the incident to the crew, but they dismissed her claims. "That corridor doesn't exist," the steward insisted. Determined to prove them wrong, Sarah ventured back that night. At 3 a.m., the door appeared again. Inside, she found not just photographs but rows of journals, all written by passengers who had disappeared. As she flipped through the pages, the whispers returned, growing louder until they became agonized screams. Behind her, the woman appeared, now joined by dozens of others, faces sunken, limbs twisted. "You're one of us now," they whispered. Their hands grabbed her, pulling her into the darkness. When the Elysian docked, Sarah was gone. Her room was untouched, except for a single photograph on the desk. It showed the woman in the tattered gown, standing next to Sarah, their eyes vacant and hollow. The Midnight Wave was a cruise to remember, but not for its luxury. For decades, it was said to harbor a terrible secret. Passengers reported seeing ghostly apparitions and hearing screams from the lower decks. Once you step aboard, the ship becomes your grave, and the sea your eternal prison. Raj and Priya boarded the Midnight Wave, excited for a romantic escape. The ship exuded opulence, golden railings, a grand chandelier illuminating the lobby, and staff dressed in immaculate white uniforms. Yet, despite the lavish surroundings, Priya couldn't shake an unease. Their cabin was spacious, with a balcony overlooking the endless blue. As Priya unpacked, she found an old photograph tucked inside the bedside drawer. It was of a family, their faces partially faded. Written on the back were the words, "They never left." Priya showed Raj, but he dismissed it as someone's forgotten keepsake. That evening, they attended the captain's gala. The ballroom sparkled with laughter and music, but Priya couldn't stop staring at a man across the room. His eyes were milky white, and he didn't blink. When their eyes met, he smiled, a wide, unnatural grin. As the clock struck midnight, the lights flickered, and a piercing scream shattered the celebration. The music stopped, and the guests looked around, confused. The man with the milky eyes had vanished. That night, Priya woke to the sound of dripping water. Raj was asleep beside her, but the balcony door was open, the curtains billowing. Stepping outside, she froze. A woman was floating in the water below, her face illuminated by the moonlight. She was pointing upward, directly at Priya. The next morning, Priya was gone. Raj searched the ship, growing increasingly frantic. The crew was unhelpful, insisting she must have disembarked at the last port. Returning to their cabin, Raj found her wedding ring lying on the pillow, dripping with seawater. Determined to find her, he ventured into the ship's lower decks, areas marked as off-limits. The air grew colder with each step, the walls slick with condensation. He found a door leading to an observation room submerged beneath the sea. Pressing his face to the glass, he saw dozens of pale faces staring back at him, their mouths open in silent screams. Among them was Priya. Raj never made it back. When the midnight wave docked, the staff cleared his belongings. A new guest checked into the same cabin, finding the same photograph in the drawer. This time, Raj and Priya were in it, their faces pale and hollow, staring into eternity. The Azure Majesty was a floating palace, known for its world-class dining experience. But beneath the polished cutlery and glittering chandeliers was a sinister secret. The last meal some passengers ever ate was served in the grand dining hall, where echoes of laughter turned into screams and the taste of food turned into the stench of death. Emily and Daniel were newlyweds seeking adventure. The Azure Majesty boasted luxury and charm, making it the perfect destination for their honeymoon. They were particularly excited about the dining experience, a grand hall with crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed walls, and a menu curated by a Michelin star chef. Their first dinner aboard was nothing short of magical. The clinking of glasses, the hum of a live orchestra, and the scent of exquisite cuisine filled the air. Emily noticed an elderly woman sitting alone at a corner table. She was dressed in an outdated gown, her hands clasped tightly around a tarnished silver locket. Every now and then, she would glance at Emily, her hollow eyes filled with something unsettling. Was it sorrow? Or anger? "She's just lonely," Daniel said, trying to reassure Emily. But something about the woman's gaze made her feel cold. The next evening, they were assigned to a different table, closer to the center of the hall. As they sipped their wine, Emily heard faint whispers, like someone murmuring her name. She glanced around but saw only cheerful faces. Daniel noticed her unease. "Relax, Em. It's probably the wind or the waitstaff." But the whispers grew louder. And then, the laughter in the hall stopped abruptly. Every guest froze, their heads turning toward the elderly woman. She stood slowly, raising her glass. "To the damned," she said, her voice cold and guttural. The chandeliers flickered, and the hall was plunged into darkness. When the lights returned, the elderly woman was gone. The guests resumed their meals as if nothing had happened, but Emily noticed the locket lying on their table, its clasp open. Inside was a faded photograph of a family, and Emily recognized her own face. Panicking, she tried to show Daniel, but the photo was blank when he looked at it. "You're overthinking, Em," he said, though his own voice wavered. That night, they decided to skip dinner. But at precisely 8 p.m., a knock came at their door. It was a steward, inviting them back to the dining hall for a special meal. Emily refused, but Daniel, curious and hungry, insisted they attend. When they arrived, the hall was eerily quiet. Only a few tables were occupied, and the other guests appeared off. Their movements were jerky, their faces pale and expressionless. The elderly woman sat at the head of the room, smiling. "Welcome back," she said, gesturing for them to sit. The first course was served, a soup that smelled of decay. Daniel hesitated but took a spoonful. "It's fine," he said, though his eyes didn't meet hers. Emily pushed the bowl away, the stench too much to bear. As the meal progressed, Emily noticed that the guests were not eating but staring at her. Their mouths were moving, but no words came out, only faint echoes of laughter. When the main course arrived, the lid of the silver platter was removed, revealing a steaming dish of nothing. But the smell was unbearable, a mix of rotting flesh and burnt hair. "I can't do this," Emily whispered, standing to leave. The elderly woman slammed her hand on the table, and the room fell silent. "You must finish your meal," she hissed, her face transforming. Her skin cracked like dry parchment, revealing dark veins underneath. The guests began to change as well. Their eyes turned black, their mouths stretched unnaturally wide, and their laughter grew louder, echoing like 1,000 voices in a cavern. Emily screamed as the tablecloths twisted like vines, wrapping around her arms and legs, pulling her toward the head of the table. The elderly woman leaned close, her breath cold and foul. "You're one of us now," she whispered. Daniel tried to free Emily, but his face contorted in pain as the other guests dragged him away, their hands unnaturally strong. Emily's vision blurred as she was forced to eat from the empty plate. The room spun, and the last thing she saw was Daniel, now seated among the ghostly diners, his eyes hollow and lifeless. The next morning, Emily's cabin was empty. The dining hall was pristine, ready for the next set of passengers. But a new portrait adorned the wall, a painting of Emily and Daniel, seated at the grand table, their faces frozen in terror. As the next group of travelers boarded, the elderly woman smiled from her corner, waiting for her next guests to join the feast of the damned.